Goodison Park, one of the great football arenas, a stadium that has hosted some unique moments down the years. One record set at Goodison still stands today, that of Dixie Dean, who scored 60 goals in a season, 60 league goals in the late 20s. Needed a hat-trick on the final day of the season to get across the line, but did. I think about the 70s, Ball Harvey Kendall, an era that Alex Young saw Everton almost burdened then with the handle of the School of Science. So good was that team. I was there when Bob Latchford got across the line, got 30 league goals, and ironically needed a hat-trick in the last day of the season to do it, Andy. But that is eclipsed, many, many wonderful moments, but eclipsed, I think, by the team of, well, we've called this programme Blue 85, haven't we? The team that became the greatest ever in Everton's history between 1984 and 86, 87. 85 was special because that laid the foundations for it all. And it really came from nowhere, in my view.
It did.
Because there was not a sign of how good it was going to get during the early period of Howard Kendall's tenure. But something changed, and I hope that we can investigate and find out exactly what it was, because the team that started winning, well, at different times would take your breath away. I know there's an occasion that you look back on and all the many things you did in your career you describe as the best night of your life playing football. But when you joined, it's a different story, wasn't it?
Yes. Not only for Everton, Casey, for me. I was like an ageing centre-forward, 28 years of age, I think, coming up 28. And I'd been at Wolves a couple of years, and Wolves had been relegated back up, looked like we were getting relegated again. The club was in turmoil there. The only assets they had were the players, and they had to sell, and I was one of the assets they had. And I got a call one Friday that Howard Kendall wanted to meet me, and would I be interested in going and talking to him? And I just thought I needed a change, and I thought Everton, had a look, 17th. I thought, I thought 17th, not much better than Wolves, or even if they were then. But I thought, listen, Howard I'd known. I'd played against Howard when he was in his latter years, and he played for Birmingham City, and I was at Villa early on, and I knew of him, and I knew Harvey Kendall ball, that triumvirate. And so I went to meet him up, and there was a pub near Belfield called the Queen's on Queen's Drive.
Yes, just very, very close to the old training ground.
That's it.
At Belfield.
Belfield, that's it.
Yeah.
So I went up, met him in the pub, we had lunch, talked, had a couple of glasses of wine, and said what he said. I think this was on the Thursday. And I liked what he said. And although they were struggling, I liked Howard. I liked what he said. I liked how he talked about football. I liked what he was trying to do. And I thought, yeah.
Were terms important, or
for me,
were you sold entirely by what he said?
What terms? I could not tell you right now what I signed for. I have no idea. It was something that never ever bothered me in my career. I just used to go and trust. But no, he just says that would be the deal. This would be the terms. I've gone, fine, not a problem. The problem was, it was the Friday, and they weren't going to get me registered in time for Nottingham Forest on the Saturday, unless I signed on loan. So I had to sign a loan deal, right, so I could play on the Saturday, and then on the Monday morning, I signed a permanent deal, but it got me to play on the Saturday against Forest.
There were other matters surrounding the transfer that I'll ask you about in just a moment, but you know, Terry Carron was already there, wasn't he?
Yes.
You were the last roll of the dice. That was it.
That was it.
For Howard Kendall. I know that he was advised against doing the deal. Your record at that time was not... You say old, 28's not.
No, it's not.
But it felt like you'd been around a while and that your best days were behind you. And a lot of people had said to Howard, 120 grand, was it?
Something like that.
And that literally there was no more money.
Correct.
So this was, and Howard was under enormous pressure. What Everton had wanted from him, expected from him. Bright young thing at Blackburn Rovers, former Toffee, obviously, great player. but it hadn't worked out.
No.
So if you hadn't produced, the ship was sinking.
Yeah, I was the last one. I was only bought for another reason, Keezy, is the price. He only had 120 grand left. That was it. If he had 150 grand, I wouldn't have joined Everton because he'd have gone and bought somebody who was worth 150 grand. They looked around, they thought, who can we get for 120,000? I was in that bracket. That's how bad I was, by the way, at that time. That's how bad I was, or had become, or I thought I'd become. And
for context, it is worth pointing out for those who don't know that at one time you were the most expensive player in the UK, the second most expensive footballer in the world.
Yeah, that feels like a long time ago. but it felt like a long time ago.
That clearly is what Howard thought he was signing.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness to not just me, what happened? There were a couple of things, and you're aware of them, I know you are. There were a couple of other things that were happening at Goodison that happened at the same time as I went in. And they were very, very important, I think, in the long run. Colin Harvey's promotion from youths. Reserves to be in Howard's number 2 was massive for Howard. Peter Reid was the other part of it, I felt. Peter had been trolling about wide, basically, as a wide player, hadn't he, for a long time. Howard decided to put him infield, play him in the centre of midfield, and it was like he'd bought a new player.
Well, that's what Reedy was. As a very young man at Bolton before he got injured, he was a 10.
He was a 10, yeah. Goal scorer.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, take your breath away, how good he was.
Yeah.
Ironically, he got injured playing against Everton. George Wood wiped him out in a league match on the snow. He should never have played again. No. That injury was so bad, it would have ended anybody else's career.
Do you know he came down to sign for Wolves? When I was at Wolves?
Yeah, I did know, yeah.
And somehow it never happened, or else Reedy could have been at Wolves with me.
But Reedy made himself a different player.
Yeah.
The end of my time watching Everton came around just before you signed.
Right.
I'd gone and I was now working in Manchester, but still in touch with them. Howard, he almost instantly hit the wall when because he came as player manager, don't forget.
Yeah.
So he's playing himself in central midfield, and he couldn't get about.
No, he couldn't.
And he was playing Reedy wide right, and he couldn't get about. There was no legs in that team.
None.
And then he signed the Magnificent Seven, and I've told you this story before. It shows how different things were in those days. I'm sitting at home one night on the Wirral. Phone rings. Richard, it's Howard Kendall. Oh, yeah, Howard. You kind of sit up and go, oh, yeah, Howard, how are you? What do you want? I've just made another signing. I said, go on. And I think, because he said, Mick Ferguson from Coventry. And I could hear myself wanting to say, why?
Why?
And I went, oh, wow, right, great. You know, and Mick was one of 7 that he'd had a go at. And I think one deal, Howard would tell you that Neville Southall was part of that 7, but I think Everton were going to sign Neville anyway. And then there were people like Jim Arnold and Alan Ainscough, Mike Walsh, the defender, Mick Ferguson, Mickey Thomas, who he got rid of almost in the blink of an eye. And these players, they just weren't Everton players.
No.
For the most part, I don't want to be unkind, but they were just doggers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just wasn't right.
In fairness, was one of them Neville, Big Nev?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, Big Nev. Yeah.
Nev.
I mean, he'd signed. Adrian Heath was already there. Adrian was a big signing from Stoke.
Massive.
But not really going anywhere.
Working.
I sat and watched games, Andy, at Goodison Park in front of 14,000 people.
I played.
I mean, it's unthinkable.
That was staggering.
It's unthinkable. But they gave him time, I think, because his name was Howard Kendall.
Yeah, 100%, Richard. That's what they did, and that's what I went there, and I remember my first day at training, and I'm out with the boys, and that was a week after the first game because I obviously didn't train that first time when I signed, and I went going up on Monday. We had a full training session all that week, and I'm looking at young players I had not heard of. I hadn't heard of their names, and they hadn't been household names. And I'm thinking, wow, unbelievable talent. That was the first thing that crossed my mind. The skill and the youthfulness of the group that I was joining. And I thought, I got excited. I got excited about it. But nothing happened, for about till the turn of the year.
Just complete the story on the signing, because that 120 grand bought a player that failed the medical, didn't it?
Well, yes. It was funny because, can you imagine it now? A transfer when the player is called by the club he's leaving, i.e. Wolves, to say, Andy, can you pop into Molyneux before you go to Goodison tomorrow and pick up your medical records? And I went, yeah, no problem, I'll pop in this afternoon. So I drove in this afternoon and I left, like, carrying my medical records like this, about that thick. And I thought, I went home.
A knee that had been operated on
6 times.
6 times.
Six operations on my right knee. So it wasn't in the best of states. And other various parts of my body that had been injured over those years, this 10, 11 years that I'd played. And I thought, I can't take this up. They'll never sign me. They'll never sign me. So I went home, and I used to have a big open fire. So I sat there that night and went, right, that can go in the fire. That can go in the fire. I'm not taking that up. That can stay. That can go in the fire. So by the time I'd gone through my notes, there was about that left. So I happily went to Doc Irvin, Ian Irvin, the doc. Wonderful man. And I handed him my medical records, and he went, is that it? I went, yeah, that's it, doc. He said, do you know what? I could have sworn you were injured a lot more than this. I said, popular misconception, doc. No, that's it. That's all I've had. Said, doc. And he said to me, he looked at me and he looked at my knee. And I had played on the Wednesday night. How's this? I played on the Wednesday night against Preston in a League Cup tie. That's why I missed the League Cup run that year. Preston, one game. And we'd got beaten, I think, by Preston Wolves. And my knee, as it used to do then, after a game, would swell up, fill with fluid for about a day, 24, 40 hours, and then go down again. So this is right on the back of a game. So my knee's up like this, skeezy. So I put my legs out like that, and the doc looks at my right knee, and he goes, wow. I went, that's okay, doc. He went, as a matter of interest, Andy, if you're not playing for Everton tomorrow, what will you be doing? Oh, it's Thursday. If you're not playing for Everton on Saturday, what will you be doing? I said, I'll be playing for Wolves, doc. He says, you'll be playing? I said, yeah, that'll be down by Saturday. And I'll be playing for Wolves if I don't sign here. And he went, that's good enough for me.
And Howard was determined enough to make it happen.
Yeah, and it did.
You not only was it bad for Everton as a football club, it was bad because Liverpool were bossing domestic football at that time, which made all the hurt at Goodison even more painful.
And I think they just...
Were you aware of that in any way?
Oh, yeah, listen, I think as a football fan, as I have been all my life, and as somebody who played in the English League for 10 years, up to 11 years, I think that I was very aware of the imbalance on Merseyside between Everton and Liverpool. Absolutely, you could not be. I'd played against Liverpool so many times, and Everton, and I always found, obviously, you found it was much more difficult to get a result against Liverpool than it was to get a result against Everton. The players that they had were there, Souness, Dalglish, these people, Rush, all these kind of people, Hansen, Lawrenson, iconic, brilliant footballers. So I was very, very aware.
But Everton had times.
Yeah. Spells.
Yeah, they were the first of the two Merseyside clubs to win the FA Cup. Mm-hmm. I mentioned the team Alex Young, the Golden Vision, Ball Harvey Kendall, Joe Royle, the 1970 Harry Catterick's team that had won the trophy. Gordon Lee had a good side, as Aston Villa knew well, because it took Villa 3 games to beat them.
It did, I was there.
In a final where I think people that were watching Everton then thought, Gordon's on the cusp.
They had a chance. They had a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that didn't work out either.
No.
So it was back to the drawing board. It was back to Howard. I mean, it's a programme this about Goodison. Were you aware of it?
Yes.
As a stadium?
I was aware of its uniqueness. And the one thing everyone always talks about at Goodison, even though it's not the biggest ground in the country, by any stretch of the imagination, was the atmosphere and how it gets and how it can be intense. And I got that. Because, as you know, the stands that were built then, the rake, would that be the right word to use? That would be right. Instead of going away and sloping away from the pitch, it almost went straight up, certainly in the big main stand. So you always felt that the crowd were there, like on top of you, and the noise was just coming from the stands onto the football pitch directly. And I think that's what made it unique. I always enjoyed playing there. That
main stand was groundbreaking when it went up. I'll give you a unique who cares stat, but it was the first English stand to have an escalator.
You needed it.
And they made a lot of it, Everton, at that time. Goodison, a ground that had staged World Cup games in 1966 with the sort of penny rounds at both ends to keep the crowd away, if you remember.
Yeah.
So it was evolving, not in a way I don't think that Everton had hoped it might, because that 120 grand literally was
it?
what was left in the pot, and
Yeah.
there was no more.
None.
So it was aging and decaying at a time when the team was that Howard was in charge of,
Yeah.
and nothing looked very bright.
Nothing looked very bright at all. And it didn't, for the first 6 weeks I was there, it didn't look like it was
So
any
what
better.
do you think actually changed? And don't be shy. You mentioned Peter Reid.
Uh-huh.
Evertonians look at that era and say, Gray and Reid.
Mm-hmm.
What was the moment? What started it to
I'll tell you what.
give you the feeling it was going to be different?
What gave me the feeling it was going to be different was I met someone in Peter Reid who was a kindred spirit, who was like me, who hated losing. He wasn't the best player in the world. We were much better players than Reid and I, but we had a fiercely passionate dislike of losing. Fiercely. And we had a young team that were with us. And I think, and I hope I'm not blowing my own trumpet too much, I think the young lads fed off Reedy and I, began to understand what being a footballer was like, and actually winning football matches was fun. And it was much better than losing football matches. But that obviously took time. And I think when we got, and there's a month in the Everton's history that I think changed it, and that's January 84. From the first game we played at Birmingham City till I think the last game we played. And in that month, Howard came to us at pre-match at Birmingham, sitting in a hotel, pre-match meal. Howard sat us down, all of us, and he'd been very loyal to the core that he'd worked with. And he simply said, this is it, guys, for you lot. If it doesn't happen starting today, then I'm going to have to rip this up. A lot.
He almost certainly knew that it was it. That was it for him as well.
Yeah, probably. And we went there and we beat Blues 2-0 at St Andrews. And in that month, Keezy, it was amazing. There was a famous Stoke City FA Cup tie. The one which Howard famously opened the windows of the dressing room, and the noise from the Evertonians poured into us.
Well, you say famously. It's not necessarily for everybody
if you're not
watching.
An Evertonian now.
Tell us.
Well, we went to play Stoke shortly after that. Always difficult to go there, particularly in the 80s. And tiny little dressing rooms. And in the dressing rooms, just below the ceiling, there were those kind of windows you could flip open. And right outside the windows was the core of Everton fans, would you believe? Down a little bit, but you could hear it. And Howard very quickly stood up, got up, opened every single window in that dressing room, just said, sit down for a minute, guys. And we all sat down and he went, listen to that. Going to let them down? We've gone, no, boss, no. Played the game, won it, 2-0. Cup tie, big one, FA Cup. Then, in that same month, the very famous, now this is a famous, the Oxford City game, Oxford United.
I'll forgive you, there are two clubs in Oxford.
Forgive me, thanks, man.
Unusually.
Oxford United, we go to play them in the League Cup. I'm cup tie, so I can't play. And we're losing 1-0. And then Kevin Brock, with his infamous pass back that little inchy Adrian Heath, with about 5 or 10 minutes to go, nips in, go round the keeper, slots it in. We get a replay. Beat them 4 the next week. And that month, when we won, turned it around in the league, had a couple of wins, won an FA Cup tie to send us on that run. It took us all the way to the final, and stayed in the League Cup when it looked like we were going out. That month, Keezy, of January 84, for me, was a turning point. Because after that, you felt the change. I did. I felt the change. I felt people, like Graham Sharp were fulfilling their potential, like Trevor Stephen, like Gary Stephen, Kevin Richardson, all these kind of people, Kevin Sheedy, wonderful footballers, Keezy. Our skipper, Rats, couldn't get a game. He wasn't getting a game when I first joined.
Well, when I watched Kevin Ratcliffe, he was just a bang ordinary left back.
Yes.
That was going nowhere.
He couldn't get a game.
But had something that set him aside from the rest. Pace.
Lightning. As we say, catch pigeons. Derek Mountfield. No one had heard of Derek. Suddenly they were beginning to form a partnership that were as quick as anything.
Just briefly, you mentioned Graham Sharp. Gordon Lee signed him from Dumbarton, I think.
That's it.
For about the same sort of money as Howard paid for you. And he clearly always had something. But nobody found out what it was until he started playing with you.
Yeah.
In a pair that that good judges had decided before Howard put you together was never going to work because you were too much alike.
Yeah.
So what happened?
As I say, I liked Graham, obviously a fellow Scot, and we got on famously together and became very close, and still are very close friends. And I just thought Sharpie was, when I met Graham, he was a scorer of great goals. He wasn't a great goal scorer. What I think he needed to do was become a great goal scorer. You know, those magnificent goals he used to be credited with, smashing them in from, like the one he got at Anfield in the 1-0 victory.
Which we'll discuss going forward in the programme.
That was what he was then. And it was things like being a centre-forward, how to jump up and protect yourself and make it difficult for the centre-back, little things like that.
Well, tell us, what is the key?
Well, the key, certainly there was a lot more long balls played in those days, obviously, to the front guys. And I had been taught as a kid that if there's a centre-half behind you, then what you do, if you get up early and get between him and the flight of the ball, he loses the flight of the ball for a bit. And even if he heads it before you, his header won't be a good one, that kind of drop, and your team could pick up possession. I always came from the side, so that I never, if I could, I would never just let him stand behind me. I would always go from the side, so I had a run at him, and I always led with my arms to protect me.
Legally. But that was the key then. That was just getting up that little bit earlier.
Yes, to protect yourself, to make it hard for them. And I also said to him, what we need to get you doing is scoring more goals from 6 yards, 12 yards, tap-ins. I said, forget this smashing in from 30 yards. You're going to get that you'll get your share, but you won't get 25 goals by doing that, or 30 goals by doing that. You'll get 30 goals by having 15 tap-ins and then around the 6-yard box. And I think he took that on board as well. And I think he liked playing alongside me as well. I think we both did.
So, were you say you felt a change? Did you dare dream about what that change might include at the end of that season?
No. I mean, when league form started to pick up, obviously the League Cup, which I was a spectator for, got all the way to the final to play Liverpool, who beat us in the replay.
They did.
Souness at Main Road, wasn't it? Main Road?
Yeah.
So he smashed one in at Main Road. But we were still in the FA Cup. And we'd been, the draw had been kind to us. That was the other game in January, I might say, Gillingham, when we took 3 games to beat Gillingham. And that was a day, just quickly, that we were going out the FA Cup at Gillingham. We'd drawn 3-3, first game, I think. We drew 0-0 at Goodison, went to play them. Howard dropped me. First time in my life I'd ever been dropped. And he left me out the Gillingham game. So I was furious. I wasn't very happy. And we drew again, and Tony Cascarino, he's a part of Everton history, and that FA Cup tie went through with 2-3 minutes to go, 1-on-1 with Big Nev. I'm thinking, we're out here. I was on the pitch by then, I said, we're out. And he goes through, and Big Nev did what Big Nev did. He saved it, stopped it, kept us in. We played them a third tie down there, and we beat them 3-0. So that was massive for us as well. But we kept getting good draws like that. And we played, did we play Telford in that run as well? At Goodison?
Yeah, I think they gave you a scare as well,
3-0 eventually, we won comfortable. And that was it. And until we got to Southampton in the semi-final at Highbury, we had been growing in confidence. I could sense it. Every time you used to see the boys, they would go into a game like Southampton and think, well, who? Southampton? Laurie Mack, Southampton. Laurie McMenemy. A good Southampton.
Very much, yeah.
Full of experience. They ran out, you could say, experience. Mick Mills, Frank Worthington, big Frank there. Frank was there, wasn't he? That kind of team.
They'd won the cup under Laurie. Let's not forget. They'd beaten Manchester United, hadn't they? I think they were second that year to Liverpool in the league. They'd won at Anfield that season.
There you go.
Keegan was very much a part of the side by then. They were a good side.
They were good, but we played them, and little Lynchy, Adrian Heath, popped up with a header late on from one of the worst free kicks you'll ever see from Peter Reid. I'm not joking. He tells you he picked him out perfectly. He scuffed a free kick from wide on the right. So we're all there, me, Derek Mountfield, Sharpie, all the lads are in there ready for it. And this thing comes in about this height off the ground. And luckily, Derek Mountfield had gone to the first post, and he managed just to flick it on. He couldn't score, he just helped it on, and it bounced about 4 yards out, and little Lynchy came in and just went straight in from as far as I am to that wall. And the whole place, Keezy, erupted. And I mean, erupted. Pitch invaded. We were there. They weren't scoring against Nev. We knew that. We were there. And when we got there, it was like, I had to calm the lads down. Honestly, we're doing interviews. And the league form continued to get to be good. hardly lost to
Finished
football.
seventh, I think. That
Finished
season.
went from 17th to 7th. That was an incredible jump in half a season. But we get into the final, and now you get asked to do interviews. You know, who's doing interviews? And I'm listening to some of our kids, as I would call them then, our young players, and they're saying, well, what about Watford? Watford can't beat us, no chance. We'll beat them. We're not worried. I'm going, no, lads, no. That's not how it's done. You say, yeah, good side, we expect a tough game. No, but we don't, Andy, we'll beat them. Yeah, I know we will, but you can't go about saying that because you just don't know. But that's how confident they had become, Keezy, in a matter of 6 months, that there was a belief now that we could go and win something. And we did. Of course, we won the FA Cup at Wembley. Wonderful day. First trophy since 68, was it, for Everton?
No, so they won the title in 70.
First since 70. So that was a long time. It was 15 years, 14 years in the making, waiting for that. And it was just a brilliant day out. And you just sensed that something was happening. But then, of course, you play that game. It's the last game of the season. You go away, and then you wonder, I wonder what will happen in the close season. I wonder what the gaffer will do. Who will go? Because some are going to go. Who will come in to strengthen? And we waited and we wondered, and then we saw.
That seems to me like a very good time to end this particular episode. But the story, of course, the story is still being told today. And we're part of that. But it's worth revisiting, and we will do in part 2, starting with what exactly did happen in that summer.